Hey guys, Montel here, and thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. And look, make sure as you tune in, make sure you subscribe. And if you want to leave a comment, leave a comment. We love to hear from you. We want to know what's going on. I know recently you guys have really been tuning in and paying attention to a lot of the podcasts that we've been doing, especially the one with Redman and I. And we had so much fun doing that. And we're going to continue to do many, many more just like that for you. And today, I got to tell you, I'm very excited about having a guest on that we have with us today. My guest today has conducted medical research in more than 45 countries across 5 continents and the South Pacific. He's taught yoga and meditation and natural health for over 4 decades. He is known as the medicine hunter on the Dr. Oz Show, CNN Health, the New York Times, and many, many other media outlets. He's authored 15 books. In his latest book, The Lotus and the Bud, examines the role of cannabis within the ancient yogic traditions of India and Himalayas, and includes an illustrated guide of the practice of the way he practices cannabis and yoga. Chris, thank you so much for being with us today, sir.
Oh, thank you, Montel. It's a great pleasure to be on with you. How you
Yeah,
doing today anyway?
I am doing great. Let me hold up the book here. It's called The Lotus and the Bud by Mr. Chris Hellman. Thank you so much again. I'm going to make sure people see that. I'm going to hold it up from time to time throughout the show so people can catch it. I'm doing great, sir. And how are you doing?
Well, fine. We're up in Massachusetts and it's cold winter here, so we're just dealing with that. But all things considered, given the state of the world, we're in a kind of a fortunate place. So I'm thankful for that.
Oh, absolutely. Like you're considered the medicine hunter and really like the Indiana Jones of plant medicine. Let's back up a little bit and why don't you tell us how you became so interested in plant medicine?
Well, as a teenager, I had a kind of a fascination for herbs, and I really didn't know anything about them. I was not well informed. I hadn't grown up with them. I didn't know anybody who knew anything really, but I just kind of had this interest. And over time, read a few books, went to some organic farms, went to herbal shops, developed that interest more. And over many, many years, worked in the natural product scene. Investigating crops all around the world from apple crops in North America to turmeric crops in India. And I've been traveling the globe full time as a medicine hunter for 27 years now, except for the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sorry to say. But and doing this work throughout, China and different parts of Asia and all over Central and South America and Africa and the Middle East and the South Pacific. And it's been a really phenomenal experience to go into indigenous native cultures, to spend time with those people, and to help to establish sustainable trade in medicinal plants and herbs and spices and work with those communities.
Well, my friend, I just don't understand though. I mean, living in a time, especially in the last 22, 23 years, where we become the synthetic pharmaceutical, creative world that we are. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of pushback you have had to have gotten from looking at plant-based medicine.
Well, you'd be surprised, Montel. I mean, I've been an invited guest at Pfizer, Roche, SmithKline, GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, all the big pharma houses. They invite me in. I talk to them. I share about plant medicine. All of their researchers, every last one of them has read the medicinal studies on plants. They know these things work. They just can't play with them because they can't patent them. It drives them crazy. But initially, many years ago, I did get a lot of pushback. People in my position were called the fruits, nuts, and flakes. We were very much derided in the media. We were considered kooks. And people aren't laughing anymore because the science on plant medicine is extraordinary. Many hundreds of thousands of papers and studies. And you've got scientists working all over the world on this, in addition to rich, rich, robust traditions of health that just plain work. So we're seeing a different time right now, for sure, with plants.
I think we're seeing it because the masses are demanding it, but I'm not asking you because I want you to disparage the
Right.
pharmaceutical industry. That's not what I'm asking. But what really throws me is that you just said it. They're finally starting to recognize the research has been done.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not like, I mean, when you hear this current president and the vice president talking about we're going to be a research based, administration. Give me a break. Because if they were really a research based, administration, they would be paying attention to the research that our own government has funded for over 50 years when it
Right.
comes to just that one product, let's say cannabis.
Mhm.
Um, I've been really excited about plant-based medicine my whole adult life also, and not just cannabis. I have so many questions for you because I really want to get into things like rhodiola, ashwagandha, shashandra, lots of things that we find that have been here on this planet for thousands of years. That, not shaman, but, doctors over the course of thousands of years have looked to help solve some of the problems of today, yet we can't seem to get our pharmaceutical industry away from thinking that they can replicate what God made best.
Well, and it's kind of ironic because if you look at the class of, chemotherapy drugs,
Ah,
Montel, they're almost all plant-derived. Some of them come from insects, some of them come from sea creatures, but for the most part, they're compounds derived from plants, and they happen to be quite toxic compounds too, there's no question about it, but, it's not just a matter of either or with pharma. The basis of pharmaceuticals for up until the 50s was plants, and now we have a real, strong synthetic sector that isn't as effective. A lot of drugs fail their phase 2 and 3 trials. It's not easy out there, and the fact is that the tradition of plant-based medicine works. When you go to India and you see how people deal with healthcare with their Ayurvedic system that includes diet and exercise and meditation and yoga and herbs and fasting, and it all makes sense. It's a lifestyle, and we really have been pushed into a strange kind of drug dispensation system. That's not healthcare. That's not taking care of people.
no, absolutely not. And what I find just so crazy is the fact that you just hit it. You said, back in the 50s, we recognized that plant-based medicine was probably the key. And we skipped it for 50 years. Now we're coming back to it after 50 years. And it doesn't make sense to me, especially since, the amount of money that our government has spent itself on plant-based medicine. Let's talk a little bit about, cannabis.
Sure.
And when you first started to experience when did you first experience cannabis yourself?
I first experienced cannabis when I was 15 years old, so that was unbelievably that was 1967, okay?
Mhm.
And, it was a thing of the times, it was available, friends had it, I tried it. First time I tried it, absolutely nothing happened. It was really disappointing. My friend, who I shared a joint with, got really high, and he was obviously having a great time and a happy experience, and nothing was happening to me, and I was really kind of annoyed by that, but, the second time it worked great, and I was, okay, very excited. Alright, now I understand what people are talking about, but that was a long time ago.
And a lot of people don't recognize, especially even people who have now come to cannabis for the first times in their lives, this does happen to some individuals.
Mm,
Cannabis does not necessarily provide that euphoria your first go round because your endocannabinoid system literally goes, bing, what is that? Is that what I've been looking for?
right,
That's
right,
what I've been
right.
looking for. Just give me that again. Oh yeah, I know what you are. I mean, and that's where I think when we talk about cannabis as a plant-based medicine, I can't continue to have those conversations unless I bring up and talk about the endocannabinoid system at the same time because we are genetically disposed to being affected by that plant, which is similar, produces cannabinoids that are similar to the endocannabinoids we produce ourselves, correct? And our
Well,
entire
yes.
endocannabinoid system is antagonized by those cannabinoids within that plant?
Well, we when we eat dietary oils and fats, we produce two, as you just said, endocannabinoids, cannabinoids inside our bodies, and they feed the receptors throughout our entire bodies from our brains to our toes. And they help to balance, different systems in the body, the cardiovascular system, respiratory, immune, bones, on and on. And
Gastrointestinal?
and when we often do not make an adequate amount of these endocannabinoids, and it's probably due to poor quality dietary oils in many cases. So when you take in cannabis, you're supplementing the endocannabinoid system. You're basically feeding it its essential vitamin, if you will, in the form of THC and CBD and the other 115 cannabinoids that we know, and the terpenes, and on and on. You get this rich panoramic effect of biological activity. And that, has a super stimulating effect on the nervous system and on sensory enhancement, all the things that we're familiar with that we experience as the high of cannabis. Or if people are just utilizing something that isn't THC rich, then the relaxation and the expansion that you get with something like a CBD rich hemp oil, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I guess, now your first experience like mine was probably from a recreational standpoint, but you suffered a pretty traumatic back injury, did you not? A severe neck and back injury.
Yeah.
And you turned to cannabis. And why? Why cannabis at the time that you did that when no one else was doing that?
Well, actually, it was a little kind of just good fortune. I did break the seventh cervical vertebra in my neck, and it was an extremely painful break. Caused me a lot of pain for a long time, and I didn't want to take opioids. I didn't want to be doped out and constipated, and so I was really suffering. And a friend of mine suggested that I smoke some cannabis for it, and I hadn't smoked in years since college. And I thought, why would I do that? And he said it'll help with the pain. And I literally had never had the experience as a teenager of utilizing cannabis for pain. So I tried it, and it had a fairly significant pain mitigating effect. And and this kind of relates to the Lotus and the Bud, my book. I also knew that if I were to sit in full lotus position, I could quell the pain in my neck some more. And I found when I did the two together, when I sat in lotus position and got high, that I could get rid of almost all of the pain and dwell for a time in a pain free state. And so it was really serendipity that my friend recommended cannabis, and doubly so that I combined it with yoga and made this interesting discovery about the fusion of yoga and cannabis.
You call yoga primarily a practice of the nervous system, correct?
Right, right, right. And it really is that, it's funny, Montel. Um, I'm sure you've held a piano wire in your hand, you know? It doesn't have much stretch, okay? But it has just the tiniest little bit. And when you can get that piano wire stretched to just the right amount, it has this beautiful, brilliant, clear tone. And that's really what happens when we practice yoga. And I mean, the full practice of yoga. So that includes meditation and relaxation, in addition to postures and breathing. Um, you really tune up the nervous system. And what I've found, and I'm not the first person who's found this, this is actually an ancient tradition, is that when you combine cannabis with that, you get this much, much more alive sense of the entire nervous system and all of the energy that's running through the body. We have at any one time a couple of million volts of energy going through our bodies. It may not seem it, but when you add up the numbers, we really do. So it's about harnessing that, tapping into it, directing it, focusing it. That's really the practice of yoga.
And yoga, like you say, is not necessarily all about stretching. It's more about stretching the mind,
Mhm.
correct?
Yes, yes, very much so. Some of the greatest yogis I've met just meditate. Delightful people, very wise, very high, very clear-minded, just sit and meditate. So, yeah, it's pretty broad. I mean, you can do the more, physically challenging yoga practices as well. I did that for a long, long, long time, and I still practice a couple hours of physical yoga every morning, but it's really a driver for meditation, for that concentrated energy in the mind.
And that's something that we have as a people, I mean, have gotten away from in the last, 100 years of technology.
Yes, no question. As we've bombarded ourselves with influences from all around us, so that every second we're seeing an ad, the constant intrusions, it's actually harder for people to create space where they can just sit and enjoy a little bit of inner serenity. But the fact is, we have this deep, limitless well, this infinite well of energy and peace that we can draw from if we just create that bit of space. So even though the forces of modern society are clearly against us, it's something to cultivate nonetheless.
Do you think that we have kind of turned the corner here, when it comes to, utilizing cannabis correctly and thinking about cannabis correctly as a society? Or do you think we're still mired in the prohibition idiocy of, the last century?
I think it's both, really. I mean, clearly you have people who got the memo a long time ago. I suspect you did. I know I did. It's like, okay, this stuff is fine. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, it was like 10 years old, living in the Boston area, and WBZ radio, I think, announced that in a couple of days they were going to air a live pot party from some place in downtown Boston. It was like a big thing. And I listened to that show when they aired it because I thought, well, I've heard that that drives people crazy and they become heroin addicts and they kill people, all that. And so I listened to this show and I remember standing in the kitchen going, "Oh, these people sound smart and like they're having fun." And it was a very different thing. I was expecting, unbridled crazies. And so I think to to your point, there are many people who have figured out, hey, this is a good, highly beneficial, superb plant that deserves our respect and is certainly worth taking into our lives. And then you have other people who are very phobic about it, who think it's the work of the devil and all that. I mean, I don't think the matter is solved at all.
Well, and it's really odd to me how we have that extreme view of this. I know you've spent some time, you go back and forth on Dr. Oz's show. I've been on Mehmet's show multiple times. In fact, he and I did maybe now it's close to 6 years ago. We did a show, about cannabis. One of his first shows on cannabis, which was one of his highest rated shows to date.
I'll bet.
So, um, where we had a very serious conversation about cannabis. And I went back to him again, and Mehmet and I were one of the first on TV to talk about cannabis as an exit drug for opioid addiction
Mhm.
and talked about cannabis as a viable medicine. It raised a lot of eyebrows back then, but still, even till today, I know, he is kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because he really can't extol the virtues as well as he knows they're there.
No, and I think that a lot of doctors are in that position, unless or until federal regulations change, doctors are really walking on tightropes. And, I know in Massachusetts, where I live, many of the doctors who a few years ago much more freely gave recommendations for people to, go to the medical dispensaries had to ease off on that because they were being hassled by health authorities, even though the state allowed what they were doing. So it's not a settled time for sure.
And just if you had the crystal ball and think about it, do you think we're headed in the direction where they're going to start easing up a little bit more? Or, I kind of have been arguing almost the opposite. I mean, you take a look at the fact that last November 3rd, in 5 states, the nation spoke. And, the only winner of the last real election was, I think, cannabis nationally. Yet you turn around, what is it? South Dakota is now trying to pass legislation to overturn what the masses voted for. And New,
Yeah.
New Jersey is trying to put as many impediments in place as they possibly can to slow down
Yeah,
adult use. I just don't get it.
well, I mean, I think that these social, waves, we've had this long multi-decade wave of phobia about this beneficial plant that, keep in mind, until prohibition was available to men, women, and children everywhere. I mean, there were cannabis lollies for kids,
Oh
you
man, but,
know?
but people but people don't even understand that before prohibition, people used to eat hemp seed protein cereal, kind of
Oh,
porridge.
yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
and people don't want to admit the fact that, literally tobacco wasn't and cotton wasn't what made America the country that it is. It was hemp. People don't get the fact that, back in 1690s and 1700, all of our forefathers grew hemp.
Right.
You were required, if you were a farmer, to grow hemp.
Right.
They didn't have, testing laboratories, so they couldn't determine whether or not it was 0.001% or 0.3% THC. They just grew a plant.
Sure, sure. And there's no question that hemp, the whole Hemp for Victory program during World War I especially was
Correct.
critical to the Allied success. But
Correct.
but still you have a lot of people who have been tainted by the propaganda about cannabis. I mean, what was it in 96, I think, the World Health Organization commissioned a report comparing tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis. And the report was so damning about tobacco and alcohol, and so pretty positive about cannabis, that US drug officials suppressed the release of that report.
Correct.
You have this backlash that relates to a private prison system and laws that favor income for people who are penalizing people and deriving income from that. I mean, there's this whole creepy social scheme that has arisen up around the illegality of cannabis that has nothing to do with its safety, nothing whatsoever. It
Yeah,
has to do with an out of control society, really.
I often talk about the fact that, unfortunately, when it was vilified, a lot of people don't know that, the Anslinger, who was one of the major forces in getting cannabis called illegal, and then again, people don't even know that it was made illegal by the Marijuana Tax Act.
Right.
Didn't have to do anything with a Marijuana Drug Act. The same guy who pushed that forward was a guy who was an advocate for cannabis during alcohol prohibition. Because Anslinger used to speak about the fact that at least cannabis, and they use the other term marijuana, which I won't use,
Right, right.
but but marijuana at the time he talked about it being less violent than
Mhm.
alcohol. So people have just been hoodwinked because they don't want to recognize the fact that this is something that has been perpetrated against our society just so that they can continue to have a enslavement tool. When
Yeah.
you look back over the last 100
Mhm.
years, when 80% of the people who have been arrested for cannabis violations are people of color,
Mhm.
you start to recognize that this has less to do with anything other than racism than it does real illegal drugs.
Well, and in fact, Henry Anslinger's push to have cannabis become illegal was really based on this completely baloney notion that brown-skinned men were giving cannabis to white-skinned women to have sex with them. I mean, that was the scary proposition, and it was
And
completely
that
awful
quote,
and
that
racist
what you
from
just
there.
said, for those who are listening to Let's Be Blunt, you need to understand that that quote is a quote that you can find online
Sure.
from Henry Anslinger having made that statement. It makes a black will make a black man want to step on a white man's shadow and have white women have sex with him. It's
It
absolutely, absolutely. The whole idea of stepping on a shadow is really crazy to me. I don't get that at all.
But,
But
at the same time, I am hopeful. I mean, for example, in many states, as you know, people can grow. Like in Massachusetts, we can grow our own. So, with the exception of getting some seeds and some fertilizer, whatever, we're pretty much out of the whole economy of this, if we wish to be. I live in the country, all my neighbors grow, pretty much everybody in town grows. Um, and I have seen this in Oregon and Washington State and Colorado and parts of California, and it does make me optimistic. I think that the dawn is breaking, if you will, for cannabis, and people are kind of helping to return it to its rightful place, both as a profoundly beneficial medicine, as a food source, and also for future fiber and plastic. There's no question it is the future.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we do know that the byproducts from cannabis are there are two public companies out there right now that have figured out that the cellulose material from hemp is a better storage capability of electricity than graphite. And
Okay.
and then when you think about hempcrete and hemp, bricks,
Right.
we know that that could be a direction we could go in to help mitigate some of the dangerous global warming issues because hempcrete bricks do absorb CO2.
We're learning more every day.
We're
Learning more.
learning more and more every day. So let's talk a little bit more about, again, this moniker that you have as being, the medicine hunter. There are so many other profound plants that are out there, like from ashwagandha to kava to maca to rhodiola to shashandra, all these things that you've worked on.
Right.
How are we starting to see some of this make its way into, consumption by the masses?
Well, I think it's coming from a couple of directions. First off, as I mentioned earlier, the science is very good now. I mean, with something like you mentioned something like ashwagandha, which is, a highly valued herb in India. It's been used for thousands of years, has a great safety profile. But now there's also a very large body of human clinical science to support its traditional uses for
Mm,
energy, endurance, stamina, sexual health, improved mental vitality, better immune function, all of that. And so we're seeing science catch up to the traditional uses of a lot of the botanicals. That's giving healthcare practitioners much more confidence in these things. Also, at the same time, it's people getting results. You know how this happens. It happens in your life. You encounter this. People say, I tried such and such for my whatever, and it worked. Why didn't the doctor tell me about it? Why didn't they tell me that I could use, feverfew for my migraines instead of the migraine medicine I'd been using? This stuff works. So I think that a lot of it does remain people sharing with each other the experiences they have. If you're nervous and you take some kava and you get wow, okay, just a little bit of a pleasant back off from that peak of stress and just catch your breath.
mhm.
You're having the experience. You don't need to be told that's real. You're having it. And you tell your friend, hey, listen, I was really stressed out before that meeting. I took some kava. I was really relaxed in there. I was clear. I got a lot done. That's a lot of how it happens, is passing on from one person to the next.
Absolutely, and sharing with others. I mean,
Mm.
you're working with or you're in residence for a group that's called I'm sorry, Purity Products? Tell us a
Well,
little bit about that.
I have a small line of supplements, herbal supplements that I do with a company called Purity Products. Basically, as you've mentioned, I travel all over the world. I'm in extraction facilities all the time where companies are making concentrated extracts of different herbs, whether it's ashwagandha or kava or maca or whatever, and we use those extracts in the supplements that I have with Purity. And it's really, for me, it honestly is a matter of fulfilling a mission to help people to be more healthy. I mean, yes, for sure, I want and need income like everybody else, but my driving, motivating force really is more. I want people to be healthy. I want people to be happy. That's why I, promote natural plant-based remedies and also promote yoga and, those aspects of life that just kind of relieve us of the burdens of stress and do make us feel more fulfilled.
Now, let's talk a little bit more about, again, Lotus and the Bud, so people can go and get this now. It's out now, right?
It is out now. Yeah. Basically, as I think you probably know, the combining of yoga and cannabis is now something that is somewhat popular out there. People hold classes now where before they didn't really used to do that, but now this combination is being much more widely utilized in different situations. In some cases, it's all CBD based and not THC based, but in other cases, it's whole psychoactive cannabis. And I like to go deeply into topics. It's a great fun for me. And since I have about 50 years of experience combining these two, it seemed to make sense to me to write a book about it. So I've combined a lot of what I know about yoga, which goes way back to my teen years, and also the interaction of that with cannabis and my experience, in temples in the Himalayas in India and in different places around the world to give people something that hopefully is simultaneously informative and fun to read.
And you give people, a breakdown of a lot of the poses that are in here also with explanations.
I do. I want to make this practical and usable for people because, I mean, especially now, people are at home a lot, unless they're frontline workers and they have some time to practice some yoga where maybe they didn't before. So I'm hoping to kind of give a little bit of an assist in that way.
And to my friend, you have been on quite the journey. I mean, again, you traveled millions of miles, I'm sure, by now, but you've also, been the gamut of not just because of the places that you've gone and your journey has taken you. You have literally had I don't know anybody who's had the list of illnesses and maladies that you got from malaria to, numerous other tropical diseases to you've gotten parasites to nerve damage to, you've been chased by pirates, you've been held at gunpoint, you've, been
That's all
burned,
just
been
part
bitten,
of the
been stung.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, look, it's going to happen. I mean, it, it's funny. I never thought when I was a kid that I would wind up, an explorer going to like bug infested places all around
Mhm.
the world. Um, but I have to say that the reward of meeting people in different cultures has been so spectacular that I'm completely willing to put up with those hazards. I've been very, very fortunate to be well received where I've gone. I really haven't had a lot of trouble, I haven't had people be, particularly harsh with me, and I get invited into communities that I never would get into if it weren't for the plant connection. And so whether that's in Congo or Syria or Vanuatu or Morocco or wherever, the plants are kind of, they're the connection with people and communities. And I wind up making friends all over and having experiences. I mean, for 6 years, my friends and I did these massive, massive South Pacific firewalks in Vanuatu, South Pacific. And I'm not talking about a backyard empowerment workshop where you put some coals on the grass. I'm talking about full on, absolutely terrifying, gigantic pits of fire, and I would never have had these experiences if not for this work. So for me, it's been the most remarkable gift, and I believe that the gift, the sheer beauty of what I've been given demands that I do something with it. So I communicate, speak all over the world, share about other cultures, try to foster some better understanding of different people. That's really what I do. And yeah, the tropical diseases suck, let me tell you. When you're lying on a couch and you're like at 104 fever and it feels like you have hot needles in every joint in your body, yeah, really, that's no fun. But
Mhm.
but but if it were a matter of, okay, work in a cubicle and stay safe and don't go out there and travel, forget it, man.
Yeah. Well,
No
you've been kind of
way.
yeah, you
No way.
yeah, no way, right? You've been kinda chasing this cannabis plant all over the planet for years, for
Yes.
40 years plus, from the Himalayas to the beaches of Jamaica.
Yeah.
You've got an opportunity to actually smoke bhang with the Indian, sadhus, and you've, picked cannabis flowers along the Silk Road.
Oh, yeah.
Um, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
do you think from a worldly perspective, you take a look at what's going on now, China's starting to grow hemp, and growing it in at a massive amount, and so is
Right.
India. Do you think the world is gonna start leading the way before the United States catches up?
Well, I mean, the world is already leading the way. Israel has been the leader in science research in cannabis for
Funded by the
decades.
United States government.
Yeah, they completely left us in the dust, though. The Europeans have had a robust, hemp industry with, very specific approvals for different strains of hemp, very advanced cultivation and genetics and the whole bit. We haven't had that. In fact, I think the world has fairly substantially left us behind, but it is the case that the United States has been the pressure point for causing most other nations to make cannabis illegal. So
Are we
the
forcing
reversal
them?
of that
Mhm.
is maybe going to come in the opposite direction, actually.
Absolutely, because I think, there's the things that are going on in places like Colombia, places like, Spain, India, China. I think, the US is gonna get forced into whether they want to or not. They're gonna have to do so to compete.
Yep. Montel, I guess about 16, maybe 18 years ago, I had occasion to go to a region of the southern Siberia called the Altai. And that's where, when the last ice age ended, that's where cannabis reemerged. It had existed before, but it was buried under ice for, about 100,000 years. When it emerged, it came out of this area, the Altai, and I happened to be there. And I was riding in a van with friends. We were heading way south, and looking in all directions, I saw this plant, and I thought, this can't possibly be. Everywhere I looked in all directions, it was this plant. I got out and looked, and it was all cannabis. And we went through about 800 miles or so of cannabis just from then on, millions and millions and millions of tons of it. And yes, I tried some. I thought, well, I want to know if this is psychoactive or if this is just hemp. And it turned out it was psychoactive. And subsequently, then, as you said, I've followed that also along the Silk Road in northern China to the west, and there is a surprising amount of cannabis out there that nobody's doing anything with. Millions of tons is not an exaggeration. So I think we're on the brink of a new time, and I'm not sure exactly the shape of that, but I don't think we're going to have this illegality for that much longer, really.
Especially since we've now started to see, even if you can't refute science. And I mean, recently I've read some things about, the fact that we've now determined that, there are some of the flavonoids that have now proven to be greater anti-inflammatory than any of the medications we have in the marketplace today.
Mhm. Mhm.
We also have, we know that a couple of the cannabinoids themselves literally restrict the ability for cancer cells to find a blood source. We
Right.
also know that, and when you change the terpene profile ever so slightly, and terpenes are found in lots more plants than just the cannabis plant, but we know that terpene profiles actually can adjust and elicit responses that we've never before known could happen. Everything
Mhm.
from, anxiety reduction to, anti-inflammatory to analgesic effects. So, I agree with you. I think that the more and more science, and now the fact that the DEA is going to allow for more and more research of, larger sample size of what's being researched, I think that it's going to be too tough to deny.
Well, when you're talking about the terpenes, you're really talking aromatherapy here. That's the crazy thing about it, you know? We've known about the terpenes for 100 years.
Absolutely.
We've known their structure and what they do, and there are some fabulous, works on this, but it is the case that that terpene profile, depending on what it is, can have a huge influence on the effect of the ganja. I remember, um, gosh, this must have been 96 or something, being out in the Himalayas and coming upon a garden of cannabis. And there were these big, big, big buds. And there was somebody nearby, it was theirs. And I asked if I could smell it. And he said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, sure, sure." And just holding these buds to my face and breathing in the terpenes was its own journey. It was a completely high experience, floral and skunky and exotic and beautiful. And I just thought, you know, it's endless what kinds of aromas and effects you can get from cannabis. So I think as we go on and people continue to play with, different soil mixes and how that changes the terpene profile and all of that, we'll continue to make new discoveries that relate back to our health.
I agree with you 100%. I also think that, there is room for science and technology when it comes to things like that. I mean, from gene editing to things like that. And I'm sort of just very, very minor manipulation. And I'm not talking about, creating something that's fake, but
Right.
we can enhance the certain terpene profiles in certain strains or
Mm.
cultivars. And if we do so correctly, I think we could probably find that this plant, like you already said it. I mean, I've heard as many as you said 115, but I've heard in Canada they're claiming there's over 160 cannabinoids. I don't know that yet, but when we finally figure out the true number of cannabinoids, and then we finally figure out the true number of terpenes. I mean, you've got something that can be, exponentially configured, probably, a couple 100,000 different ways.
Yeah, and there is a program in Israel, that is, they've actually run several thousand people through this program for different, healthcare purposes, specific terpene profiles of cannabis for different health needs, headache, digestive troubles, etc. And while I would say at this point in time that the data is not as advanced as it will be, we already have some good information on how the terpene profile can make a particular type of cannabis more suitable for, say, one particular health need versus another, whether you're talking sleep or reduction of anxiety or, reduction of stress and on and on.
Absolutely, and we'll find out more and more. I think you nailed it. I mean, we're starting to do a lot of computer simulations and taking a look at, the one thing that we can do with a computer is we can literally run samples, a million times
Sure.
faster than a couple of years ago when we could only run maybe 10 of them. So, it's amazing. I think that the work that we'll see be done over the course of the next 3 to 4 years that I think is going to change the way people look at the plant at all. And I'm excited about the fact again, like your book again, we're combining the two and looking at into what yoga and cannabis can do together.
Well, a lot of people practice yoga now, and to a different extent. Some people practice yoga twice a week for 20 minutes. Some people practice a couple hours a day, every day. I mean, it just depends on who they are. But for sure, there is a great interest in yoga practice. Many people have aches and pains. Sometimes you find that adding a little bit of cannabis to that helps to relieve that pain, makes the yoga easier to practice. Enhances a sense of expansion during relaxation and meditation. I mean, I'm a big believer in practicing without cannabis. I've done thousands of hours of yoga without cannabis, but I also think that the amplifying properties, when you go deep inside, I like to say the deeper you go, the lighter you get. When you go deep inside and you have that great sense of expansion and that opening up, that delivers a sense of greater peace and ease. And I think that, this balance of the two, has been proven over millennia, just over millennia, but we're rediscovering it in a new way, and we're learning to talk about it in a different way, like the sophistication that you were just describing in terms of figuring out how different terpene profiles make a difference in the effect. We have a long, long road of discovery ahead of us, taking this practice from antiquity and bringing it forward into modern times.
And that's something that people need to understand. This has been around for close to 5,000 years, and mankind has written about it, talked about it, and now all of a sudden, in the last 100 years, I like to often talk about, when you really stop and you take a look at the planet, and you think that we've been around. This planet has been here, depending on who you listen to, what scientists you listen to, 9 billion, 10 billion years. If you took a piece of paper and you drew a line across that piece of paper, the total time that man has been here represents maybe one little dot on that
Right,
line.
right at the
And
very end, at the
at the
very end.
at the very end,
Right,
and we could have
right.
and anywhere along that line, we could have been here, disappeared, been completely flattened by an ice age, completely destroyed any evidence of us being here before, and come back again.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. No question. No question.
And
Look,
that's why when you say, you look at the resurgence of, or the re-identification of cannabis, after the last ice age, well, we wonder, why do we have an endocannabinoid system? Clearly, it was something that nature thought was necessary
mhm.
for mankind.
Yeah, yeah, and it is uncanny that this particular plant satisfies so many human needs. I mean, the endocannabinoid system, and I'm sure you've had many people talk about this, harmonizes all of our other systems. It's remarkable that we didn't know about it till the 90s, really. It's just like,
That's
how did we miss this? Okay. It's like missing your
not,
skeletal system.
I mean, not only how do we miss this, but how do we deny talking about it? I mean, when we
Right,
know science has already proven that it is, what is responsible for cellular homeostasis.
right,
And
right,
if
right.
we know that, if we had the nerve to write that down somewhere and say specifically, you look at Dr. Meshulam out of Israel and several others who have done the research on this, we recognize, okay, I'm using big words when I say cellular homeostasis, but it's what balances every single cell in our body.
Right, right.
It,
And
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 it
so and so cannabis stands to play an epic, not supportive, but epic role in all of this for humanity.
Absolutely. Well, and let's talk a little bit more about, again, you know, the fact that yoga is a process of unstressing or de-stressing, um, by understanding, all the physical and mental and emotional, impediments and that restrict our spiritual freedom. For those who have been reticent to embrace yoga,
Mhm.
explain to them what you think they could be. Again, you just hit nailed it. A lot of us are sitting at home, we're sequestered away, we're, hunkered down and not getting out, not getting enough sun, not getting enough vitamin D naturally by staying inside of our little places.
Right.
But yoga could really help to open up, just like, there's cellular homeostasis that you get from cannabis. There is overall homeostasis that you can get from yoga, right? So
Yeah,
explain that a little bit.
that's the curious parallel really to yoga and cannabis. While cannabis is working through the endocannabinoid system to basically promote homeostasis among all other known systems, yoga does the same thing through the nervous system. Uh, and yoga really is an approach to living, so it involves certain postures and exercises and breathing methods and meditation and good diet and other forms of exercise. I mean, making sure you get out and walk and all of that, that's really all part of a yogic lifestyle. I think that some people are afraid that yoga is difficult, and you can certainly find some very gymnastic forms of yoga that are difficult, stuff I can't do. But that's not really the purpose, is to sort of go on an Olympic athletic track with yoga. It's to find whatever is your edge of strength and flexibility and comfort and work there with yoga practice. And even if you carve out, 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week to start, that continual dipping into inner refreshment really turns people on. When my friends and I started practicing yoga in our teen years, because we just got inspired by the idea, we were stunned by what we were tapping into, this extra energy, this extra vitality, this extra mental freedom, reduction of stress, and on. Um, I think, I mean, I don't want to sound like too much of a yoga infomercial here, but, when I travel around the world, I take yoga everywhere. All I need is a flat piece of ground. Don't need any equipment, don't need any special clothing, don't need anything. You just need a place to practice. I would encourage people to try it out and not to be discouraged because there are other people who can do wildly athletic things that you'll never be able to do. That's not what it's about. It's really about inner clarity and focus and feeling more in harmony and living with greater awareness and compassion. That's really the big deal.
Mhm. There's a couple terms that I'm a little not confused about, but would love to hear more about. Yamas and niyamas, what is that?
Well, the yamas and the niyamas are really rules of living, rules of guidance. For example, being honest in word and deed, and the whole idea, pretty much like the guiding principles that you find in many philosophies and religions, is that if you want to maintain a good life, you adhere to certain principles of living that basically reduce the potential for conflict. You don't steal from others, you don't, get it on with somebody else's wife or husband or whatever the situation. You speak truthfully, you help others, you're observant of the needs of others, that kind of thing. In addition to the experience that you have in yoga practice of expansion and awareness, also fashioning life behavior with the yamas and the niyamas, these simple rules of living, really helps to keep your life trajectory less encumbered by problems. You've met people in your life who are problem magnets. Whatever is the worst thing they can do in a situation, they're going to do it. It's going to cause conflict. It's going to result in suffering. They're going to suffer. Others are going to suffer. If you can just shape your behavior so that you reduce that suffering greatly, then that helps with overall happiness and joy in living. This is what we've got right here, right now. Whatever happens after this, we don't know. But we know we have this. So if we can live it joyfully, if we can live it openly, if we can live it with great vitality, why wouldn't we?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what's next for Christopher Hallam?
Well, I am currently working on another book called The Shaman's Pharmacy, which is about my decades of work in the Amazon with and in the Andes Mountains with shamans in South America. And I'm about a third of the way through that, and COVID-19 does provide an opportunity to write, so I've been doing that. But I really do hope, Montel, that once I'm vaccinated and things are a little bit more normal travel wise, it'll be back out on the trail because, um, I love investigating medicinal plants. I love sharing about other cultures, and I'm really not ready for that to end yet.
Well, now in sharing about other medicinal plants and cultures, there has been a movement recently, and I say recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, a movement when it comes to psychedelics.
Hmm.
And, a lot of people don't understand psychedelics. So, what have you found so far about psychedelics? And do you find them like science is starting to believe that psychedelics may have significant impact on people's lives when it comes to stress, PTSD, depression, and things like that. Is that what you found?
Well, yeah, I mean, a little bit of a retrospective. In the 1950s, there were thousands of psychiatric papers generated about the benefits of psychedelics in therapy, specifically LSD and also psilocybin, synthetic psilocybin, as manufactured by drug companies at the time. Um, in my work, I work with plant-based psychedelics, especially ayahuasca, which is a profoundly powerful psychedelic brew that is used by shamans in the Amazon. And we've seen a lot of modern science, the Johns Hopkins University Medical Center study with cancer patients and psilocybin, that when people utilize psychedelics in a situation in which they feel safe and which the conditions are right, you can have a profound experience that can help with things like great trauma. In the case of the Johns Hopkins study, this is terminal cancer patients, people who are dying. There's no maybe they're going to die. They're going to die.
Right.
And the greatest majority of the people in that study had the most significant spiritual experience of their life with psilocybin, and almost all of them lost their fear of dying. So we know that the psychedelics can help to rewire our thinking. And I mean that quite literally. We have these neurological pathways that become our habitual responses to things in our lives. And with psychedelics, we open up many other different pathways, so we have greater flexibility of internal behavioral choices. Many people struggling with PTSD from bad military experiences as a result of being in war zones have found some relief with the psychedelics, and we're seeing more studies of that type. And yeah, I speak on psychedelics all over the world, and I think that this is a great and burgeoning field. And I've sat with, in excess of 60 shamans in the Amazon and Andes, participating in ayahuasca ceremonies down there. And I've seen people healed of things that they didn't think they could be healed of, traumas and pains that they thought they would be stuck with for life. So I think we're in a new time with psychedelics for sure.
And are there any other amazing plants like that that are may over the next couple of years be breakthrough plants?
Well, I think that we're seeing with the plant Iboga from Africa, which has been used traditionally and ceremonially there as an initiatory plant. We know that it is one of the best things we've ever seen for helping with opioid addiction. It contains an alkaloid called ibogaine, which actually was an anti-addictive drug in the US up until like 1963. Um, and there are clinics that are working with ibogaine now, and I think this is a very big deal, frankly. I think this could deliver a lot of help and benefit to opiate, people who are opiate addicted. And it is not something that you have to do again and again. I mean, you do it, you get off your addiction, and you don't remain on ibogaine. So I think that's a big thing. I also think that we have not really begun to see the more of the therapeutic applications of cannabis. I mean, I can imagine, I know it's already happening, more and more therapists getting their clients in perhaps a more receptive state for some deeper psychological work as a result of utilizing cannabis. So I think we have that to look forward to as well.
And then we also don't even really, or we haven't really dug in as deep on just again the basic adaptogen kind of plants and herbs that are out there, and things like chocolate, kava,
Well,
chilies.
yes, yes. I mean, chocolate, people love to hear this, but chocolate's probably the single healthiest food you can put in your body. I
And
had
that's not milk chocolate, that's chocolate, folks.
Right, right, exactly. I had occasion to, visit the Kuna people in Panama, and they're a very, very poor group of people, and they live almost entirely on, bananas and cocoa, and they drink, like, 4 or 5 great big thick, like, gravy thick cups of hot cocoa a day, just sweetened with banana, and, they have the people who do that have no incidence of heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, or 16 common forms of cancer. And they've been extensively well studied by Harvard University because of this. We see populations of people around the world utilizing different plants, like, for example, in India with turmeric root. They consume so much of it. We're not sure exactly why, but their rates of Alzheimer's disease are remarkably low compared to that of other developed countries. And there's good suspicion that turmeric plays a role in that. Um, so, yeah, I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of plants out there. Green tea, for goodness sake. I mean, for keeping your cardiovascular system healthy, for sharpening your mind, for improving immune function, for reducing the risk of certain types of cancer. The science is in on green tea, and when I travel around Asia, I mean, gosh, we're drinking 20 cups of green tea a day. It's just the way it is. So yeah, there are loads of beneficial plants out there that do us only a lot of good.
Right. Well, look, my friend, I cannot thank you enough for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel today. I think it's really extremely informative. You need to know you've got a home here whenever you want. You can come
Oh,
back
thank
anytime
you.
you want. And we'd love to have you back. And again, the book is called The Lotus and the Bud by Christopher S. Helm. And, am I saying your last name right? Hillam?
It's Killam. Killam.
I am so sorry, my friend. I've been
Don't worry
saying
about it.
Hillam the whole time because the K on your book looks like the H on your book. I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah. It's the typeface. Don't worry about it. Yeah, Chris
Ah,
Kilham.
Christopher Cullen, if people want to get more information from you or they want to reach out to you, how do they go? How do they find you?
They can probably just go to my website, medicinehunter.com. Again, that's medicinehunter.com, and there's too much information there, actually.
Well, I never too much information, sir. And I got to thank you again for being a part of the show today. We definitely want to have you back. Make sure anytime you have anything new and you once this thing, and just a side thought. Let's ask some one more question about that. How do you think, or when do you think this whole pandemic thing may come to at least bring itself to not necessarily a halt, but slow down a little bit?
I think we'll be in much better condition by the end of June. We will not be out of the woods. I think that by late fall, we'll be seeing conferences and things again, much more safely. I really do think that late fall is going to be a much, much better and more relaxed time for this. I've been following it very carefully, and it seems as though we're starting now to trend in a better direction, and I'm grateful for that. It's terrible that so many people have been dying.
Absolutely. And being a medicine hunter, and we know that a lot of these viruses and things have existed. And I read something that was very, very weird. I read something, this is back October of last year,
Mm,
before the pandemic even broke out. I was reading an article, I think it was in the Washington Post or some newspaper, and they were talking about some scientists who were looking at an ice core that
mhm,
was a million-year-old ice core that they pulled up from a glacier, I think somewhere in Siberia.
right.
And when they looked at that ice core, the reason why they were looking a million years ago because a lot of the ice had melted down to that level
Mhm,
all over this particular mountaintop. And when they looked at that ice core, they found a variant of the HPV virus
mm.
that was a million years old. And I went, wait. And so that million-year-old ice core had melted in other areas on the glacier to the point that that probably has been released into the atmosphere.
Oh,
Are
yeah.
we not are we not just another version of a virus away from another pandemic?
Look, there's now another Ebola breakout in Guinea, as of just the other day,
Yeah,
and
we
it could
I
possibly.
heard something about that
Yeah.
back again a year ago, that there was a new strain of Ebola, right? A different strain.
Right, right, and, as we, tamper with the environment, as we, go into more remote places where maybe viruses have just been hanging out by themselves for thousands and thousands of years, we disrupt things, we're certainly going to see more diseases and, more difficult situations like this, and I really do hope that we can depoliticize our response and really focus on delivering healthcare to as many people as possible as quickly as possible as these things happen again, because they surely will, there's no question.
Well, I mean, I kind of I applaud people like yourself because, if you again believe in science, and I do, and you believe in, Albert Einstein, and he did make the statement, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So that means for every virus on this planet, there exists something that would be its opposite on this planet. And it's going to be guys like you that help us find those opposites, that help save us all.
Well, I hopefully will be part of that and not be the guy who accidentally kicks off over the stone that has the virus that destroys humanity underneath it, I mean, it could go either way. I'd like to be on the winning side, but, it's a little bit of a crapshoot out there these days.
Yeah, I think you've proven so far, though, that you're on the winning side, my friend. So, Christopher Kilman, thank you so much, sir, for being a part of Let's Be Blunt. And again, you're welcome back. And as you travel the world and you get more and more info, we are a repository here. We love to make sure that our viewers and listeners get the most up to date information on cannabis that we can possibly offer.
I'll take you up on it, and sometime if you're ever up for it, you come down to the Amazon with me and drink ayahuasca with shamans. We have a good time, I promise you.
I got to tell you something. I did an interview recently with a woman who is really promoting, psychedelics here in the United States, and I had my. Here, I'll give you real quick before we go. I had two experiences with psychedelics in my life, and unfortunately, they were both bad, but it was when
Oh,
I was younger, and I'll tell you why. I was at a party, I had one of those high school parties, I don't think I was 16 years old, and somebody had spiked something, and I was one of the people who got a dose, and it was really the most unnerving memory I have in life,
sure.
because I remember, I look back at it and I think to myself that but but for the grace of God, I'm still alive,
Mhm.
because I remember when it happened, when it was over, I was sitting on the roof of someone's house.
Mm.
And I don't remember from like 8, and that was the next morning. I don't remember from like 8:30 at night until 8 o'clock the next morning.
That's
And
scary.
that was and but there were little patchy memories in there,
Mm.
one of which was me walking down the middle of a highway with people screaming and honking horns at me. So I know that I put myself in jeopardy.
Right, right.
Yeah. The other one was an experience that I had out in the middle of the Mojave Desert.
Uh,
And again, one of these things, not when I was dosed, but I was just hanging out with some people, and these guys were, happened to be messing with peyote, and they were cooking up a little pot of this over here in the corner. I didn't know that at the time, had no idea what peyote was, and didn't have the slightest clue. And I'm a little older than you, so this is 1975, and I remember I willingly must have partaken,
mhm.
but again, 7 hours later, waking up, and it was really one of those very odd experiences, because I was with a couple of friends, 2 girls and, another guy, and I remember we woke up in this convertible car and everybody was naked, and
Uh,
I was like, don't don't quite remember what took place last night, but I think it was okay, and I'm feeling all right. So nothing wrong with me, and my buddy was feeling okay. Nothing wrong with us. Okay. So I guess but it was the most unnerving two experiences that I've ever had in life. So
yeah,
maybe what I got to do is have a more positive one before I get out of here.
sure, sure. Why not? Why not? Well, Montel, it's been a great, great pleasure to be on with you today. Thank you so much for having me, and I'll take you up on the offer to come back happily anytime.
Absolutely, we want you back, and so you stay well, my friend. You take care of yourself, And, even though it's not done yet, keep practicing those safe mitigation techniques.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Will do.
You need to do that. And I will see you. Okay.
Okay, bless you,
And
man.
for all of you, make sure you tune into the next Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.